When I opened my eyes, I expected my daughter's face. That's the thing about being a parent. Even at 63, even after everything, some part of you still believes your child will be there when you need them most. The ceiling was white. Not the particular white of a bedroom or an office, but that clinical, apologetic white hospitals use. The kind that seems to say, we can fix the body, but we can't do anything about the loneliness. A machine beeped somewhere to my left. My chest felt like someone had parked a truck on it and walked away. My mouth tasted like copper and antiseptic. I turned my head slowly. The chair beside my bed was empty. No jacket over the armrest, no purse on the floor, no coffee cup leaving a ring on the bedside table. Just an empty recliner and the soft mechanical rhythm of a hospital doing its job. A nurse appeared at the doorway, sturdy, silver-haired, with the kind of calm you can only build after decades of watching people fall apart in your care. She told me her name was Bess. "Your daughter was here," she said. Something in her tone made me wait. "How long?" I asked. Bess adjusted the line on my IV without looking at me. "About 45 minutes. 45 minutes. I turned that number over the way you turn a stone, looking for something underneath it. My heart monitor ticked on, indifferent. "She had a flight to catch," Bess added, not making excuses for my daughter. Just filling the silence, because silence in a cardiac ICU can feel like a verdict. "Of course she did," I said. "My name doesn't matter. What I am is this. A 63-year-old retired structural engineer, a widower of 4 years, a father who made the mistake of believing that proximity means presence. I spent 35 years calculating load tolerances for bridges in the Pacific Northwest. I know exactly how much weight a structure can bear before it fails. I just never thought to apply that math to my own family. My wife passed 4 years ago, lung cancer, 8 months from diagnosis to the end. After she was gone, the house in Portland felt like a room I'd wandered into by mistake, full of furniture arranged for a life that no longer existed. My daughter suggested I move to Boise, where she and her husband had settled. She said it like she was offering me something. "You'd be closer to us, Dad. We'd see you more." I sold the Portland house. I bought a smaller place about 12 minutes from theirs. Those 12 minutes became the measure of everything. In 4 years, my daughter and her husband came to my house exactly twice. Once when they needed my truck to haul furniture, once for Thanksgiving when her husband's family canceled at the last minute. I drove to their house constantly. I babysat on short notice. I brought groceries when my daughter was overwhelmed. I fixed the leaking faucet in their guest bathroom, then the fence in the backyard, then the ceiling fan in their primary bedroom that her husband had installed wrong and refused to admit it. And then there was the money. I should say something about the money. It started with small things. They were a little short on a car payment 1 month. Then my daughter's boutique catering business needed startup equipment. She had a vision, she said, and the vision cost about $18,000. Then the kitchen renovation, which they'd begun and stalled midway, and which I finished paying for to spare them the embarrassment of a half-gutted kitchen. Then the business failed quietly, and there were debts from that too. I kept a running count for a while, then stopped when the number made it hard to sleep. Call it $65,000 over 4 years. Easy, if you count the cash gifts I told myself were loans and the zills I paid without being asked because I could see them struggling and couldn't not help. I was raised to believe that family takes care of family. My wife used to say, "You're too generous. Someone's going to take that generosity and spend it like it doesn't cost anything." She was right. She usually was. The collapse happened on a Tuesday morning in March. I volunteer as a patient transport driver for the VA hospital, have been for 2 years. It gets me out of the house. It gives the days a shape that retirement sometimes steals from you. I drive veterans to their appointments, dialysis, physical therapy, oncology. Most of them are older than me. Some of them don't have anyone else. I was helping a man into my van, 81 years old, Korean War veteran, uses a walker and doesn't ask for help but accepts it graciously. When it happened, a pressure behind my sternum, a heat in my jaw that had no business being there. My left arm felt like it was being inflated with something dense and wrong. I sat down on the curb because my legs made the decision before my brain could argue. The old veteran looked out the window. he said. Son, you don't look right. Then he called 911 from his cell phone, calm as a man who has been in worse situations than this and survived all of them. The last thing I heard was him giving the dispatcher our exact location, voice steady, unhurried. The kind of voice I have spent years listening to on my own worst days, never expecting to need it for myself. Then the morning closed over me like water. I woke up in the cardiac ICU with a stent in my right coronary artery. Bess told me I'd had a significant myocardial infarction. She said I was lucky the man I was with kept his head. She said that was probably why I was still here. Lucky. The word felt thin, but I held on to it. My daughter called that evening from somewhere that sounded like it had wind and distance in it. She was in the Azores. She and her husband had been there since Sunday. A destination wedding for one of her college friends, flights booked 8 months ago, non-refundable, hotel prepaid. She'd gotten the call from the hospital and had tried to rebook, she said. She had really tried. The earliest connection I could find was 4 days out, Dad, she said. We would have practically crossed paths. Her husband got on the line briefly. You're in good hands, he said. Rest up. We'll see you when we're back. They were back in Boise within 11 days. By then, my daughter had a tan. The day before they returned, I got a text from my son-in-law. Just checking in, hope recovery going well. Quick question when you're up to it. Have you thought any more about helping us finish the basement? We got a contractor quote and the number was higher than we expected. I read it twice. Then I set the phone face down on the blanket and looked at the ceiling for a long time. On day 3, Bess mentioned something in passing. She'd come in to check my monitors around 9 in the evening after visiting hours had officially closed. She glanced toward the corridor as she worked. Does your family know someone named Grover? She asked. I turned the name over slowly. It arrived somewhere deep, somewhere I'd long since sealed. Why? Bess adjusted a line without rushing. There's a man who comes every evening. He sits outside this unit. He doesn't ask to come in, just sits there until we close the floor at 9:30, then leaves. She paused. He brought coffee for the nurses' station last night. Left it with a note. For the team on 4 North, thank you for taking care of him. My throat tightened in a way that had nothing to do with the cardiac event. Does he have a last name? I asked. Bess studied me carefully. He introduced himself to one of the aides as Grover Payne. I don't know how long I was quiet. The monitor kept its steady accounting of my heartbeat. Grover Payne is my younger brother. I have not spoken to him in 7 years. Our mother died in the spring 7 years ago, and the estate, modest, nothing dramatic, a house and some savings, became the fault line that families sometimes crack along. My wife had strong opinions about how things were handled. She believed my brother had positioned himself during the months our mother was declining, had influenced decisions he shouldn't have. The arguments were loud and specific, the way arguments about inheritance always are. By the end of that year, I had signed the last document and stopped returning his calls. My wife was a woman of principle, and she was often right, and I loved her without reservation. I also know, sitting in a hospital bed at 63 with a stent in my chest, that I let her fight a battle I never quite understood, against a brother who used to drive 6 hours to help me move apartments and never once asked to be repaid. Who showed up to my daughter's school play when I had a work conflict and she needed someone in the audience. Who called every Sunday morning for 20 years without being asked. I hadn't let myself think about any of that until now. On day 5, I asked Bess to let him in. He came through the door the way you enter a space you're not sure you've been invited into, slowly, giving me time to change my mind. He was heavier than I remembered. His hair had gone fully white. He had our father's hands, wide and capable, and he was holding a paper coffee cup from the hospital cafeteria as if he needed something to do with them. Hey, he said. That was all. Just hey, the same way he used to answer the phone 30 years ago. How did you know I was here? I asked. He sat in the chair at the foot of the bed, not too close. Vea volunteer coordinator. She had me listed as an emergency contact, apparently from when you signed up 2 years ago, before you updated the forms. She couldn't reach your daughter fast enough, so she called down the list. He turned the cup slowly. I drove up from Salt Lake. 6 hours. Grover, I said, and my voice did something I didn't have complete control over. He shook his head. Don't. We were both stubborn. It happens. I looked at this man who had driven 6 hours and sat outside a cardiac unit every night for 5 days without asking to be let in, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not relief exactly. Something harder to name, the feeling of discovering a support beam you thought had been removed, and finding it still there, still solid, still holding. You paid something, I said. The billing office. He didn't deny it. Your insurance left a gap. It wasn't a big number. It was $4,000. He shrugged with one shoulder. You would have done it for me. That was probably the truest thing anyone had said to me in a long time. My daughter and son-in-law arrived on day 11, late morning. She came in first, pulling a tote bag with something from a bakery, picked up on the way in, as if an occasion could be sweetened by pastry. Her husband followed, phone half out of his jacket pocket the way it always was. She had color in her cheeks. Her hair had that slightly sun-bleached quality you get from 2 weeks on an Atlantic island. She looked healthy and rested, and I noticed both of those things because I had spent 11 days staring at walls. Dad, she said, and came forward and hugged me, and I let her. I am still her father. That doesn't stop. Her husband gave me a firm handshake and said I looked better than he'd expected, which I took to mean he'd anticipated worse. She was unpacking the pastries when she glanced through the glass panel in the door and stopped moving. My brother was in the chair outside the room, the one he'd occupied every evening. He hadn't come in when they arrived. He'd quietly stepped out to give us space, the way a person does when they understand what they're owed and what they're not. My daughter's face changed. Not dramatically, she has always been composed, but something drained out of it. Who is that? She said. That's your uncle, I said. He's been here every night since I was admitted. She turned back slowly. Uncle Grover. That's right. Her husband looked through the glass. Did you call him? He was on my emergency contact list from the VA. They reached him when they couldn't reach anyone else. I watched them process this. He drove up from Salt Lake City the night they called. A silence opened in the room. The monitor continued its work. My daughter said carefully, Dad, I want you to know that we tried to get back sooner. I know, I said. You told me about the flights. The non-refundable tickets, the connections. I know about the non-refundable tickets. Her husband moved to fill the pause, the way he always does. The important thing is you're okay. And listen, about the basement project, once you're feeling up to it, we should talk. The contractor says the quote's only good for another few weeks. I looked at him for a moment. He is not a cruel man. He is a man who has learned to move through the world by locating what other people have and finding efficient ways to access it. In business, that's called resourcefulness. In a family, it's something else. The basement is going to have to wait, I said. He started to respond, but my daughter put a hand on his arm. She looked at me. Dad, Grover isn't good for you. After everything that happened with Mom, after what he did with Grandma's estate. Your mother is gone, I said, gently, because it's still true in the heaviest possible way. And your mother fought a battle that I should have understood better before I let her fight it without me. I paused. Your uncle drove 6 hours and sat outside that door for 5 nights before I even knew he was here. He didn't announce himself. He didn't send a message asking for credit. He just came. My daughter's jaw worked. Where were you? I asked. Not with heat, just with the plainness of something I needed her to sit with. We explained the situation with the flights. I know where you were, I said. You were in the Azores. I understand the flights. I'm not asking about the logistics. I met her eyes. I'm asking where you were. The room went very quiet. That's not fair, she said. No, I agreed. It isn't. She looked out through the glass at my brother, who had opened a paperback and was reading with the patient attention of a man who has nowhere else he needs to be. I watched her face cycle through something private. You can't just let him back in, she said. Not after 7 years, like it never happened. I'm not pretending it never happened. I'm acknowledging that I made a choice 7 years ago without fully understanding what I was letting go of, and I'd like the chance to correct it. I reached for the water cup beside my bed. My hands were steadier than I expected. The same way I'd like to correct some other things. She looked at me. I'm going to speak with my attorney next week, I said. I need to revise some arrangements. The automatic transfers, I'll be suspending those while we work through the paperwork. And the basement is something I won't be contributing to. Dad. This isn't punishment, I said. I need you to hear that. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing it because I spent 4 years trying to buy my way into a closeness that apparently has a different price than I thought. I held her gaze. You are my daughter. I love you the way I have always loved you. But I've been your bank longer than I've been your father, and I'd like to try the other one for a while. Her husband's expression tightened. He looked like a man running numbers and not liking the results. My daughter's eyes filled, and for a moment I saw her at 8 years old, standing in the driveway after her first bike crash, trying hard not to cry. I felt the same pull I have always felt. And then I felt something else, the recognition that catching her every single time she fell had not, in the end, taught her how to land. Bess appeared at the door, quiet and precise. Patient needs rest, she said. Just that, in the tone she reserves for statements that are not open for discussion. My daughter gathered herself. She kissed me on the forehead. Something she hadn't done in years, and I didn't quite know what to do with it. Her husband shook my hand again and said they'd be in touch. Then they were gone, and the room returned to its particular silence. Bess straightened my blanket. She didn't speak for a moment. You need anything? She finally asked. Send my brother in, I said. My brother came in and settled into the chair beside my bed, the chair that had been empty for 11 days. He put the paper back in his jacket pocket. He looked at me and I looked at him, and neither of us spoke for a while. That has always been one of his gifts. He can be quiet with you without making the quiet uncomfortable. Most people feel silence because it unsettles them. My brother just it be what it is. She didn't take it well, he said eventually, not asking. No. He nodded once. She doesn't have to. She just has to eventually understand it. I looked out the window, gray March sky, bare branches, the ordinary view from a hospital room that had become somehow more familiar to me than my own bedroom. I'm sorry, I said, about all of it. The estate, the way I handled it, I let myself be steered without asking enough questions. He was quiet for a moment. You were grieving your mother and trying to keep the peace at the same time. That's not nothing. It's still not good enough. No, he said, but it's what happened and we're here now. I was discharged on day 14, not on anyone else's schedule, on mine and my cardiologist's when my numbers were where they needed to be. My brother drove me home in his truck. He helped me up the front steps and through the door and into the armchair I keep by the window. He stayed 3 days. He made eggs in the mornings because I wasn't cleared to stand at the stove for long. He watched baseball with me in the evenings, same as we used to do at our parents' kitchen table when we were kids, and the season felt like it would last all year. He didn't ask about my daughter. I didn't ask about the years between us. We just moved around each other in the way of people who have known each other long enough that words are sometimes less efficient than presence. On his last morning, we sat on the porch with coffee, while the neighborhood woke up around us. The yard needed work. I hadn't been able to get to it. My brother looked at the overgrown edges without judgment and said he'd come back in a month to help me sort it out. You don't have to do that, I said. I know, he said. We sat with that for a while. My daughter called twice that week. We talked, not easily, but honestly, which is harder and worth more. She said she understood. She didn't say she agreed. I told her that was fine. Understanding and agreeing are different things, and I am old enough now to stop confusing them. My son-in-law did not call. I have been thinking, in the weeks since, about something I used to tell the junior engineers I mentored over the years. I told them, the most dangerous failures are not the dramatic collapses. They are the slow compressions, loads that build incrementally, year by year, quietly redistributing stress until one day the materials simply stops holding. My chest held. After enough incremental weight, I stopped holding too, for a while. But structural failures reveal something useful, if you're willing to look. They show you which supports were never real, and which ones you never thought to credit. They show you, in the absence of everything else, what was actually load-bearing all along. My brother came back in April, like he said he would. He brought his own tools. We worked the yard together in the kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled, and when we finished, we sat on the porch the way our father used to, watching the neighborhood go quiet as the light changed and the day wound down. I thought about what it means to be a family. My daughter has her definition. I had mine for a long time, and I paid $65,000 for it, and I almost paid more than that. What I know now is simpler. The people who share your blood are not automatically the people who show up. And sometimes the person who shows up is the one you spent 7 years pretending wasn't there, sitting in a hallway chair every night with a coffee cup and a paperback, asking for nothing, refusing to let you disappear alone. You can't buy that. You can't guilt anyone into it. It either shows up or it doesn't. My brother showed up.